announcements. So thank you to the District Advisory Board members for being here. I'm Becky Tuttle, and it's my privilege to serve District 2 on City Council. And we're going to go ahead and introduce the rest of the District Advisory Board. And we're going to say your name, what neighborhood you represent, and as always, what's your favorite thing about Wichita. And we will start with Corey this time, because he always goes last.
My name is Corey Buckley. I'm the Community Services Representative for the city for District 2. So I'm not a DAB member. I just help with these meetings. And my favorite thing about Wichita right now is riding those scooters downtown.
Nazir Jasri.
But only in the street.
Only in the streets.
And with a helmet, and you're 18.
Right.
Other than that, go for it.
Nazir Jasri, East Kellogg Business, and light traffic in town. That's the best thing about town. Light traffic.
I'm Keith Lane, live in Sierra Hills. I think my favorite thing about Wichita, I've said this before, but since I'm up ahead, I certainly enjoyed the sports aspect of Wichita. Really excited about the new ball club coming in.
I'm Becky Tuttle again, City Council representing District 2, and I right now live in Remington Place for one more month, or one more week, really, but for this month. And I'm going to say my favorite thing about Wichita is the Nifty Nut House.
Nick Howell, Savannah. I enjoy, I've lived away from here for periods of my life and having my family around me again.
I'm David Babbage, and I live in Willow Bend. I'm not sure if I said this last time, but I enjoy our library system because I ordered a library book that they didn't have in our system, and they got it out of Oklahoma City, and I picked it up right here in Rockwell.
Personal service. Concierge service.
Joe Getz, I live in Whitetail, and clearly it's the weather. 17 years ago, I moved here from Louisiana. So,
That's an improvement.
moved from is the opposite.
I'm Janelle Everett, Waterfront, and I think my favorite thing is actually the location of where Wichita is, where I can go any corridor, east, west, or south, and go visit my friends and my grandkids. Real simple.
I'm Sam Lindeman. I live in Bonnie Bray. And my favorite thing about Wichita is still the people here. I traveled throughout the country on business, and Wichita just has some of the nicest people.
Thank you all for sharing, thanks for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started then. So we have the agenda in front of us. It's pretty robust this evening, but would welcome a motion to approve the agenda. So thank you. A second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Fantastic. Corey sent out the minutes on Friday. Thank you, Corey, for doing such a good job with them and getting sent out. I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll approve.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Second, Nazir. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Awesome. All right. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to talk about a subject that isn't on the agenda? Is there anyone from the public who wants to make any comments about anything? Okay, hearing none. We'll go to updates and issues. Just a reminder that this Saturday at 8:30 is our District 2 breakfast. If you want to come, we're going to hear from police and fire as always, but then also Evan Roselle and I think Shelly Pritchard with the Wichita Community Foundation are going to be giving us updates on the Greater Wichita Partnership and the Riverfront Legacy Master Plan. I know some people couldn't make it to the open house, and so we thought this would be a great opportunity to get more information about it. So Saturday, if you can be at the region, and breakfast is provided. So please join us if you can. And then Corey and I are going to put this on the agenda every month between now and November. In November, we have to move the District Advisory Board meeting to the Tuesday instead of Monday because it's Veterans Day and the city office will be closed. So mark your calendars, and I think Corey's already sent the updated invite, but we'll be moving to Tuesday and not Monday in November. So do we have anyone from fire here this evening? All right, way in the corner, hey.
I am Jason Jones from Firehouse Number 9. I'm filling in as a battalion chief. Been here over in 9 Battalion for, actually it's 3 Battalion now. I'm dating myself. Since I think April. So we've had some of our chiefs retire, and so we're in the process of, once the budget gets done tomorrow, doing some promotions and things of that nature. So we've had several of our chiefs retire lately, and they had served for quite a long time, some of them. So good for them. And then they brought some folks in that are on the chief candidates list, and I've been with the city for over 29 years. I'm a captain for 15 years, almost 15 years. And before this assignment, I was down to South City at Firehouse 22. So give you an update on what's happening in the district. We've had 12 fire alarms, 30 this past month, in the month of July, 39 what we call service alarms, which are check appliances, things of that nature, and 366 medical alarms. We had one major fire, which was at the Hortons carpet store, which was a little over $300,000 fire loss. And it was due to there's several electrical issues they found in the warehouse area. There were some other fire incidents that were near as significant. We always want to remind everyone this time of year to remember that our favorite part of Wichita is not the weather. We try to keep all the firefighters healthy and hydrated this time of year, but the main reminder is school starting back up, and the school zones will be flashing again, so we want to make sure that we get that out for all of the people to heed those warnings, because it creeps up on us every year, and we'll have significant heat now until the end of September. So yeah, I'll stand for any questions that anyone has.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for your service. We appreciate it. Alicia, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, so good evening. My apologies for being late this evening. School started at Wichita State for some of our students. But again, I am in the Sycamore Village neighborhood.
Thank you for joining us. Community police report.
Hello, everybody. I'm Officer Snyder. I'm back there. Here's Officer Clark. I can only tell you about my area of town because we didn't bring up all the numbers today. This is Officer Clark's first dab being on DAB 2, so I can introduce him. What we're seeing is a lot of increases in larcenies to autos. There's at least in my area, there's a 27% increase in that. So it's pretty significant. The other spikes that we're seeing is some auto thefts, as well as some residential burglaries. Most of those that I've seen and researched, a lot of times about half of them are the victim is known to the suspect and vice versa. Some of them are just random. But like I said, the big increase is just on the larcenies. Most of those happen in the commercial areas. So parking lots of the Walmarts, YMCA, stuff like that. People are basically just leaving their stuff out in the open, and people are either breaking the windows or they're leaving their cars unlocked. So that's the most significant thing that at least I'm dealing with on my side of town. Again, I work on the North Rock area with all the commercial businesses and such, so that's what I'm seeing the most of. I don't know if Officer Clark has anything else that he's dealing with.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Larcenies in Wichita have obviously been a big thing for a few years now. I'm happy to report that this past week, we have started a theft reduction slash motel interdiction team. A little history on that team. Back in 2017, myself and another officer was asked by our bureau commander to start focusing on motel crimes that occur in motels. And I know that sounds a little crazy, off the wall, but our focus wasn't on people traveling into Wichita. It was the locals that were staying in our motels and hotels up and down East Kellogg. And we've expanded now to the West Kellogg. Patrol North and Patrol South have had the Broadway Corridor team. Those guys work really hard and have done really good work over the past few years that they've been in place. Anyways, so during a year assignment, myself and my partner had, I think, right at 238 arrests out of the motels, recovering several stolen vehicles, recovering firearms, seizing money, and also seizing drugs. Some of the arrests we made, obviously we had a little bit of prostitution, it's out there, it's kind of a hard case to get for patrol officers, but we came across it. But a lot of absconders or fugitives, people that have been on the run for quite a while, they feel like they can hide out in the local motels. So, but as we were, during this assignment, our crime analysis person assigned to Patrol East kept reporting to us that thefts were down throughout the city, mainly in the East Bureau. So we went back into patrol due to staffing, but our staffing numbers are getting better. So we wanted to start the theft reduction team up again. We started last week, and I'm happy to report just 10 minutes before walking in here, I received an email from my supervisor that at least in the Patrol East Bureau, none of the beats, so all 10 beats, not one of them has a hot spot, what we call a hot spot for auto thefts or larceny to autos.
That's great.
I'm not going to say it's from the work we've done. We have, over the past week, we've put several people in jail. However, hopefully it is from the work we're doing, and we can continue to do it and see a decline in those numbers throughout the city. I think it probably will show that.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Anybody?
Any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned scoundrels, and I don't know your definition of that, but those people that stand on, or like a patrol in that area with the signs.
Vagrants,
Is that
Panhandlers.
panhandlers,
Yeah.
yes.
Panhandlers. Is that the type of people that are in the hotels, or, and is that legal?
It kind of varies. I mean, sometimes they do stay in hotels, but you get a lot of, to me, very people that stay in there. I mean, you get a lot of people that, like you said, like the absconders. You get a lot of people that are like trying to move drugs out of there. Just various people. It's not always just the panhandlers that are going to those hotels. And like the hotels vary. You think of South Broadway, North Broadway, you get like the Trail Motel, the Mark 8. That's going to be different than like maybe the Days Inn on East Kellogg or like on the Comfort Inn on North Rock Road. But you still have the different types of people that are staying in those hotels, they have their own personal motivations on what they're doing, and normally those aren't always good. So.
And regarding handlers, there's an ordinance to not.
Yes.
Yes.
There is an ordinance to not be doing that. So.
What about the groups, especially small kids, collecting on these busy intersection corners? I saw some just last week or week or so. They couldn't have been 5, 6, 7 years old running out on Rock Road collecting money from cars.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I would highly recommend you call us, hopefully, because patrol is so busy with calls. A lot of times those calls come in with panhandlers, and our supervisors we have to be selective of what we can make. If it's a non-emergency and we have priority calls holding, obviously officers probably aren't going to make it out there to make contact unless something escalates. With juveniles, I don't think that'll be the case. If it's called in that way, I think that officers will probably go out. This is the first I've heard of this.
Rock and Central.
Central and Rock?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Getting a lot of those football teams.
Yes, but it was. Small.
I've seen a lot of those
And there
out
was
and
a
about.
couple of adults, but I couldn't believe that letting their children run into the street and collect money.
Okay, yeah.
It was just plain dangerous. And who do you call? You have to call 911 because
That's
police
correct.
Yeah.
closed. And that's something else I don't understand. Why is you'd think you'd have a phone call that you could, instead of 911, you could call your
Unknown
patrol
emergency.
lead or somebody.
Well, and years ago, patrol, all the substations were 24,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
24/7, but that's changed.
Now, something, I always preach to my neighborhood, if you have anything, call 911, but, people just don't feel comfortable calling. They think,
Right.
they think it needs to be just a death
And-
emergency
and-
almost.
Yes, and depending on what it is, if the calling party doesn't want to be contacted, there's a real chance the officers may not even get, sent out for that call. Like a suspicious character call, something along those lines, because of other priority calls holding. The likelihood now, if the calling party wants contacted by police, whether by phone, and you can ask to be contacted by phone. And that's what I would recommend if you don't want an officer coming up and knocking on your door. But then we will certainly look into that. I'm not going to say it's going to happen within 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, but.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. We appreciate it.
Thank
you. Did Ellen walk in? I think so. All right, Savannah.
About a couple of events that I just wanted to highlight. On Wednesday, August 14th, from 1:30 to 2:30, we'll be holding our Senior Wednesdays program at the Advanced Learning Library. It's going to be a talk by Priscilla Howe, and she'll be exploring the story of the Brothers Grimm and their folk tales and why collecting those stories can be important for understanding the community's values. And that's co-sponsored by Humanities Kansas. Here at Rockwell on Friday, August 15th, we'll be hosting a screening of Molly of Denali. It's an episode of a show that they're showing on PBS Kids. It's a new show about Molly, an Alaskan Native girl. And that program is made possible by the support from QPTS Channel 8. We're also hosting Local Authors Day on Saturday, August 24th at the Advanced Learning Library. There's various activities throughout the day then. Part of that will be a panel of authors who will share their experience with writing, publishing, and marketing themselves. And that event will also showcase the talents of our literary community and foster some dialogue between authors and their readers. And then finally, we'll have a downloading ebooks class here at Rockwell on Tuesday, September 3rd. We'll be teaching people how to use Libby, which is our ebook, free digital ebook service. Registration is required for that, so you can call us or register online.
I just wanted to say, 2 Sundays ago, I was asked to be a judge at the Teen Hackathon.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. It was 2 days for the kiddos. They got a topic, and then they had to develop their way that they would address it, and they had to use technology. And it was pretty amazing. They developed apps over the weekend, which, yeah. And also I kept thinking to myself, if these kids weren't here on the weekend and they had, great things to eat and they had t-shirts and they had fun, where would they have been in our community? So it gave them also just a safe place to be and a chance to use their brains during the summer. So it's a great event. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Savannah, for all you do. All right, I would entertain a motion to receive and file the staff reports.
So
Okay. So let's go with Joe and Nazir. You want a second? Fantastic. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. Anyone opposed? Okay. So next we have public art funding proposal. And so I don't see Martha, but we have Jeff and Arlen.
That's Martha.
And,
In disguise.
And I'm going to move over here to this side so I can see.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Hy Tavian, and I'm here with Jeff Best. I work in economic development and city revitalization. Jeff is a landscape architect and also serves on the design council. Arlen serves on the art council. So you have a little bit of our small working group here. Patricia McDonald, who's the head of the art museum, she impaneled a group of us about a year, 18 months ago to really begin to look at how we can bring stability and predictability to expenditures on art and aesthetics in the city. So we've been working on an ordinance for some time now and want to share some of those thoughts with you this evening. Really what we're trying to do is to enhance the quality of life in town. A lot of other cities have percent for art programs. There are about 350 of these cities throughout the country. Here in Kansas, there are 2 that we've found. Both Lawrence and Hutchinson have percent for art programs. And one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish is often when art is added to a project, it's kind of the last thing that might be added. You might add a sculpture or something to provide kind of some aesthetic enhancements. We're looking to create a process where the artist is really part of the design team, which would include an architect and engineers and others. So the art really gets integrated into the full project. So we have a lot of great examples of art in other cities. Here you see here in Wichita the Nomar project that's been done, and also that's West Douglas Park with some local artists that have done that. Also, again, trying to bring some life to what could otherwise be really drab elements. If you look at the pedestrian crossing across the river, just upriver, there's a pipe just like that one that did not have any aesthetic enhancements, and it's really night and day difference in terms of what they look like, and also the functionality. With this pedestrian crossing, it gets you across the river and really adds a lot to the connectivity of the area. So these are some of the great projects that have come online here in town. The Horizontus project was completed earlier this year. I think that ended up costing around $250,000, $300,000, just to give you an order of magnitude as to what kind of funds we're talking about. Arlen and Jeff will go into a little more of the financing and the funds we're looking at for this program. I lived several years of my life in Chicago and was involved in the creation of Millennium Park. And just for context, I always like to bring numbers to these big transformative art projects. The Bean up there on the left corner, that was initially anticipated to cost $9 million. When it was said and done, it cost $23 million. I mean, the wonderful thing is it's a new icon for the city of Chicago, but to get those kind of transformative art projects, cities pay quite handsomely for those kind of projects. So one of the things we wanted to do is put this in context with some of the city-to-city tours that take place. The local Chamber of Commerce leads an annual trip to a city that we feel Wichitans can learn from. So these are some of the cities that have been visited, and each one of these cities has a similar art program. The range tends to be 1% to 2% of the capital budget each year. And this is just the last slide that I'll be covering. Of the money that we are looking to raise for this endeavor, 20% of it each year will be set aside for maintenance to address not only existing artworks, but ones that will be coming in the future through this program. So with that, I'll turn it over to my numbers guys, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end here.
So Jeff Best again. I sit on design council, so I get to actually review projects as they come in. We've really been doing public art for a number of years. However, it's been a little bit ad hoc. We haven't had a firm funding source, so basically what happens is we make recommendations to staff on how much we think each project should have or get for aesthetic improvements or for public art. And they're kind of tasked with going and finding the money between them and finance, and so they kind of have to squirrel in this corner and squirrel in that one and do some fancy things to try to get that funding set up. That's one of the big parts of this ordinance, is to actually set a revenue stream and a pot of money that actually can be drawn upon. Makes everything a lot more transparent. We know how much money we're going to be spending on it. We know how to distribute it, I guess, more equitably across projects and across neighborhoods. So if you look at this graph, basically the pot of money is the blue dot, and that's the money or the revenue stream coming in. And then what happens is 20% of that, like Ty said, goes to maintenance, which right now, typically we have about $50,000 a year to maintain the public art system, which isn't even close to enough. And as that collection gets bigger over the next few years, that 50,000 gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. So that 20% is really going to beef up kind of how we maintain what we have. Leaving the 80%, then that 80% comes across and between staff, design council, and city council, we basically distribute. Doesn't mean that every project gets 1.5% for art. What it basically means is it takes that pot of money and distributes it against projects that have been designated for special consideration or enhancements. Now that might be 4 projects, it might be 8 projects. It just kind of depends on each year. And then it also depends on what type of project, how that funding gets distributed. But that goes by recommendations from design council and staff back to city council. The other part of this ordinance is trying to streamline the process in creating an artist registry. We've kind of lost a lot of artists along the way over the last few years. And that pool's gotten shallower and shallower. So we've kind of seen the same artists arrive on projects that have had experience working on them. So we want to expand that and open it up, both locally and regionally and nationally. So we want to go through kind of an artist registry process. So the consultants like me, when I go out and put a proposal together for a project, I can look at a list of 25 artists and pick the right one we think for that project instead of picking the 2 that are out there available right now. So that's a big help, I think, for us as consultants. It's also a big help, I think, for design council and staff. But that's going to really diversify the collection and the art that we're seeing in town and the enhancements that we're getting. I think with that, Harlan, I'm going to turn it over to you now because you've got the most interesting part of this. It's the numbers.
Then we go to a screen full of numbers.
Tiny.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I tried to blur this slide as much as I could.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, the numbers are important, and the process is important, and having a city that we can be proud of is important. And when you start mashing all that together, and in 1999, we actually did have an ordinance passed that established the design council, and it said that city council should be considering art and aesthetic improvement in their buildings. So you see examples of that they've thrown up on the slide. You've seen examples in your neighborhood. You've seen examples up and down Kellogg's. However, that has all just been an ad hoc program that has no guidelines, no lane lines. It's just a wide open highway. So as we tried to sit down and figure out what part of the capital improvement budget, now that's completely separate from operations. Operations has its own world. This is strictly for capital improvement. We tried to figure out what is the right number. How do we turn this into some kind of a structured program to where city staff and the design council and city council aren't all scrambling trying to figure out what should we spend. So the city finance department went into the last 5 years. They went through invoices, they went through projects. They started digging out what have we been spending, because as my predecessors have mentioned here, there's many ordinances across the nation. 350 municipalities have a program that is structured. Wichita does not at this point. So we looked at what they were doing. It's anywhere from about 0.75 of the CIP up to 2% is the highest that we found, which is Austin, Texas. So we said, what is Wichita doing now? And when the finance department got everything done from the last 5 years, they came up with, I heard a different number this morning when I was sitting in the mayor's office, and he said that it was 1.19% of the total CIP. A report that I have says that it's 1.4% of the total CIP, but it's somewhere right north of 1% of the CIP. So when we first brought this ordinance to council, we recommended, as most of our peer cities have in place, we recommended a 1% of the CIP. So that would be a slight decrease from what we see even with the mayor's number or with the finance number. I've seen 1.19 or
1.4, we would be coming in at 1%, and that is what we have recommended as we have brought this forward. There are other calculation methods that have been brought forward. Des Moines uses a calculation method that uses funding streams and a percentage of those funding streams, and it's 1.5%. The city manager's office right now is recommending a very similar program for Wichita. And that's probably because the city manager has ties back to Des Moines. So I imagine when he was in short pants, he was part of that program, and now he's looking at something like that for Wichita. We're struggling with that because Des Moines is one of the only cities that does it that way, and it is complex. And we would rather it be a little more simple, a little more transparent. And part of the difficulty we have is as it's currently written, if we took tomorrow's CIP that's going to be presented to City Council, we would only be using about 0.34 of the CIP for beautification, aesthetics, and for art on public buildings. We feel like that's too low. That's one of the reasons we were in the mayor's office this morning explaining to him this is not the direction that we would see Wichita going. We don't really want to go backwards. We want to be competitive. So we've gone out to the district advisory boards. You folks have gotten to see the slides. And what we would like to know from you is, do you have thoughts on this? What do you think about buildings that have aesthetic improvement? What do you think about public art? What do you think about the East Kellogg, instead of having the plain walls, having something that is more interesting? And do you believe that we should continue to advocate for as much as we've been spending? Should we advocate for more? Or what is the district advisory board for this city council area? What do you folks think?
Do you have one more slide?
I
Is that one
believe
slide?
we
Okay.
have
Oh, we have one more.
one more. And what this one shows is when the keeper of the plains was given to the city, they took it, it was back before that 1999 ordinance, so they took it and they put it on a concrete slab, and they made a pathway that ran out to it, and that was our keeper of the plains. Once we started focusing on trying to make Wichita a more progressive and beautiful city, and we put the ordinance in place, they then put the keeper onto a raised platform, added the fire pits, put the pedestrian bridge in, but that all came from this program that we're talking about. But those dollars just were found and then allocated within the capital improvement budget, rather than having a program saying, here's what we should be doing. There was no structure. So we have made progress. We in no way want to say that we have not made progress. You folks can see it right there on the slides. However, we want to go into the future now, and we believe that it somehow or another should have more structure, and we'd like some input on the kind of structure you think would be good.
Thank you all for your presentation. So what we're going to do is we, at the district advisory board, ask questions, provide suggestions. Tonight, we're not making the final decision. Obviously, this is just an opportunity to provide feedback. And then we'll have some comments from up here and questions and suggestions, and then we'll go out to the audience and see if any of our community members have any thoughts or suggestions as well. So anybody in the district advisory board have any? And we have Mark from finance here, correct? Mark, is there anything you want to say? Any comments you want to make?
Answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. So any thoughts, questions? Yeah.
I have something to say. Public art, very important. We all been to places where we say, wow, we don't have that in Wichita. We don't have that in Wichita. 0.34%, too low, too low. 1+, I think that's realistic. My question is for the Chicago project, the Bean. $9 million end up being $23 million, about 250% of the original cost. What went wrong, and how do you prevent any of these projects or any similar project here in Wichita to get up to that? 10-20%, most people understand going over cost, but 250.
Well, Chicago has a very different form of government than we do to start.
Okay.
The former mayor, Richard M. Daley, he was kind of the project manager for Millennium Park.
Okay.
It was his baby. And so what started out as a $200 million park became a $475 million park. Because is what was happening, they created a bridge above the parking lot. And that bridge on that is where they created this 25-acre park. So when you start moving around all of those pieces, there are a lot of foundational and structural problems that need to be addressed. So almost everybody who looks at that objectively attributes all of the cost overruns to the mayor because the scope changed dramatically. It was called Millennium Park because it was supposed to be done in 2001. It was done in 2004 as a result of all of these changes. So, you know, that's a very different model. That was funded by, half of that was funded by philanthropy. I would love to see philanthropy be a part of this city's efforts to grow in the future. We never had those conversations. The Gathering Place, new park that was just built in Tulsa, it was also a $400 million park, and it was entirely funded by philanthropic dollars. So it would be great if we could evolve into a city that spends those kind of dollars from high-income people. But we're not quite there, and I think the more of these kind of things we can do, the better the chance to get there in the future.
I might add, typically what happens is when design council says, okay, this project needs $100,000. We think it needs an additional $100,000 for aesthetic improvements. Basically, staff takes that back, and that's a dedicated sum that basically the designers and the artists have to work with, and they work to that. Now, does it mean that they're not at 105 or 100? Probably not, but they know where that line is when we draw it. In previous years,
there was no line.
There was no line. And I think that that's the intent moving forward is we set that line in the sand. What I hope to do, or hope happens kind of as we go, is after we get a few years into this and start doing audits on projects and start looking at each project and say, okay, we dedicated $100,000 for aesthetic improvements on this. Look at it objectively as a group. Was that too much? Was it not enough? And start getting kind of some background information to help inform, I guess, everybody in the room moving forward, and you get better educated on how you allocate funds in the future.
But we shouldn't see any kind of budget where it goes 100% over or anything like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I need some clarification when you talk about revenue streams, because when I think of CIP, I just think of borrowed money. And whereas if it was on the ad valorem tax, it would be a true revenue stream. And the CIP also has roads and bridges, and now we've got $400 million for a water treatment plant that probably doesn't require a lot of aesthetics. So what's the advantage of basing it on a CIP number versus a ad valorem number?
And just so the CIP is capital improvement program.
And it's the, 10-year deal of what roads we're gonna build and all of that. But it's not real money at that point. I would think you'd be more interested in an ad valorem percentage as opposed to the CIP number. The CIP gets butchered along the road too. It all is messed with. So, and I understand that the advantage of forward plan, and then some of it doesn't have anything to do with CIP. Like, I don't know if we moved the artwork from the old airport to the new. If we moved that, I think that was planned to move, wasn't it?
I believe part of it was supposed to move over.
Actually, I don't know.
And then I was hoping they would have a statue of Eisenhower and all of those things, and that's already done deal. So I would like to see it just bring art projects to the design council and the effective board, whether it's the DAB or the library board or whoever, and put it in a budget that's based on a true revenue stream.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. Cora's capturing all these, so we'll make sure that they get. Yes, Jeff.
First, I said, applaud what you're doing. I remember, I saw the Milton quote before I was quite struck by that, as was the person I almost rear-ended, but nevertheless. I got a couple of questions. This, including the artist and design, which is not a financial issue, I presume. There's would be a requirement of some kind? Is that and you mentioned our registry, is that something we would be creating, or is that something out there?
That's something we'll create. Basically, the thought pattern right now is after hopefully the ordinance gets passed, is that design council and the group will actually sit down and start working through those guidelines in creating the registry. There's some other procedural things that we need to work through as well.
I would add something which is historical, not, it's an interest of mine, is we have some wonderful buildings, particularly in the Old Town area, that had the company up on there, which I think would be a great project to restore those. That fits into everything we're doing. So I got a couple of other questions. Do we have other dedicated lines or carve-outs in the CIP budget? I don't know.
Generally, the guidelines that I've sent, I don't know, Mark, let's take that.
Mark, you
or I
want
can-
to take that one?
I would answer that question by saying generally no, there are no other carve-outs that I'm aware of in the CIP.
I think I could say, I'm guessing that if we had this, the opportunity for more grants and public-private partnerships might be enhanced because it would be a dedicated line. Philosophically, I'm a little opposed to carve-outs and budgets, but in this particular case, it probably could be something used for leveraging additional grants.
One thing we did see when the 1999 ordinance passed, we started focusing more on doing things like this. I don't know how much you folks are up and down Douglas, but all the little bronzes that are up and down Douglas, those were all a private donor that saw what was going on in the rest of the city and wanted to finance those bronzes up and down Douglas. So it does indeed spark that in Wichita, and we see that across the nation.
But I would add, when that does happen, it becomes part of the city's collection. Therefore, the city's responsibility to maintain those as well.
I was a university professor for years, and I think it was Baylor, toward the, sometime maybe 20 years ago, every donor who was going to build a building had to endow for maintenance. That's part of it.
Jim?
So again, I agree, I applaud you guys doing, the crazy part is some of the stuff that we're looking at, I've never even seen, that it's already in existence. So we get this far, and we don't do a great job of promoting it and trying to get people out to actually see it. Of course, everybody's familiar with the Keeper of the Plain, but when I look at like the Nomar market, you know, that's beautiful. I love that, and I look and see some of the stuff and how the other people. But the question I have has to do with the budget. You got an app somewhere of a 1.4 and then a 1.19. You can give them these different numbers, right? There's like that's kind of a good significant amount of dollars that in between there. How can we hone in on the real number?
Mark, do you want to take that?
Yes, ma'am. Like Arlen said, we reviewed expenditures for the last 5 years. National Public Works did the bulk of the work. I didn't correct Arlen. I appreciate him giving me credit for doing it. The truth matter is that Terry's staff, Public Works did the vast majority of the work. But anyway, so we tried to look at what the percentage was in the past. And it was, I believe, close to 4%. However, the vast majority of that was East Kellogg. As Arlen pointed out, we had lots and lots and lots of work on East Kellogg, and that was very expensive. Of course, we had a funding stream for that. So what the 1.19 represents, that is the equivalent number to the 1.5 that the city manager has recommended in the CIP. If you look at only the local funding streams in the last 5 years and take out Kellogg, we spent the equivalent of about 1.19%. Again, the city manager's recommended 1.5%. So in that sense, he's actually recommended more than what we spent in the past if you take out Kellogg.
But you're going and you're recommending now 1%.
You may want to clarify what that means to.
So part of the difficulty with the number the manager is recommending is it's not off of a clear set of numbers on this side of the equation, because you always have your percentage over here on this side of the equation, then you have your multiple sign, and then over here we've got this piece that's a carve out of partially bonds, partially local sales tax, but only the part of local sales tax that's not being used for debt service, and then part of the transient gifts, the guest tax. So you start taking 1.5% of those projections for 10 years. Then it starts becoming a little harder for us to get our head wrapped around. And since Des Moines is the only other city that's using that kind of structure, it's hard for us to look across the nation, to look at our peer cities and say, how are we stacking up against a Boise who is growing rapidly? We don't know for sure. It is a way of getting there. At the end of the day, we end up with dollars that the design council can then allocate to projects. From my perspective, as a CPA, I prefer to make it as simple as possible to where everyone can understand it and where it's not quite as easy for one side of the equation to be manipulated.
And just one last comment.
Yes, please.
You mentioned the city tours in September. This year they're on San Antonio in September, so there's, you want to go along? I'm sure you'd like that.
I'm going.
Love
Come
to.
on. Yeah.
You're going in September?
It's gonna be a toast.
I was curious on your revenue stream, is there some way we could tax or they could get part of the tourism dollars that are being generated for like Visit Wichita and stuff? Is that all committed or is?
There is a slice of that in the current calculation.
Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking. I mean, this is all going to be in, visitors coming to our fair city are going to see a lot of this artwork. I would think that might be a revenue stream that you might want to see if you can.
The part of that that is committed to capital improvement over the next 10 years is part of the calculation as it's currently written. So that you're right on target there.
Could we increase that part?
Increase the amount?
Yeah.
Right now, we're suggesting, I mean, so if that's something that you want to make as a recommendation that it's increased, that's your opportunity to provide that feedback. Is that what you're saying?
I would, part of it's earmarked, but, in order to reach your goal that you've got set, I mean, that might help offset some of the CIP monies and as you're saying, keep it simple and, if I've got this source of revenue coming in, and then I agree that once you kind of get that rolling, there'll be some donors that will step up throughout the city and say, okay, I'll participate here.
We do anticipate that.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
More so than anything, when you were talking about all this, I appreciate art, and I think about young families, and when you're talking about downtown areas, I initially thought of Greenville, and they have their Mice on Main, and so it's a scavenger hunt. So when you think for young families that are coming or in the city, I'm looking at something different. I can only go to Botanica, Exploration Place, some of the great places we had so many times with my 6-year-old. But if there's something different, and so I think that's what I appreciate about the arts, and so I'm certainly something I support and thinking about how we continue to add value about the quality of life and really continue to attract and retain our young talent. I think is an important piece when we talk about the art. So I'm excited about this possibility.
We have a hidden troll.
Yeah.
Keeper of the drains.
Well, another private donor comes to my mind going out that was his flower.
Yes.
That comes under this too.
That would not. No, that would actually be separate. When it comes to landscape, it gets a little ambiguous. That's all private donation for the planting and the maintenance. That city did they purchased all the planters, but that was it.
All right, no other
Yeah,
additional
I
comments?
have. Years ago, I believe it was Jack B. DeBoer, had an idea about the Keeper of the Plains being, a symbol of Wichita, but something you can see from an airplane flying in. And I thought that was one heck of an idea. But, that would be, that'd be a symbol. Instead of maybe Century 2, we'd have something you can see from miles away. I just thought that was really an idea. And, that's Wichita.
Okay, Thank you for all your robust comments. Anybody from the community want to weigh in? Yes, sir. And so Nick is our timer, so sorry. And we usually allow 2 minutes for public comment.
That's fine. I just want to mention that I'm a civil engineer, I'm a consultant. You're going to hear from us later tonight. The timing is fortuitous because the project we're going to be talking about, it does have aesthetic improvements as a possible inclusion in it. So it's good information to have it. I like the idea of doing this. I think it's great. One of the criticisms of the funding in the past, when we did it in the past, is it's 5% on every project, no matter what. And that was not a good idea. I love the fact they're talking about targeted, picking good spots to do it, picking the right spots. Because if you're going to do it right. And so I really like what I'm hearing here, and everything sounds good from my perspective. But it is important to be focused on picking the right spots to do it.
Yeah, because if it's on every project, that means every time we do road maintenance or anything. So yeah, good. Somebody else? Yes, sir. And if you could state your name and your address for the record.
Okay. My name is Justin Strillo. I'm actually here representing a firm for property near 127 Pawnee, probably what we're talking about. Question that I have is, I know it's hard to quantify, but for the last 10 years, I've heard applying for public infrastructure and having issues funding that on CIP. We talked about East Kellogg and the amount of money that was spent on that. I, for one, when I drive down East Kellogg, I can't say that I stop and look at how beautiful the side of that is. I cannot argue the fact that art is important within our community, but I'm really curious on what matrices are being used for the return on investment. Other departments are having to look at the main service life pavement, or they're having to look at how that's going to spur the economy in that area. What are we doing when we're analyzing these projects and showing that this is actually going to be kind of spearhead growth for development in a specific location? Are we looking at, if you put an art piece down around a key part of town, are we looking at probably the sales revenue that's being generated from it? Are we looking at, the tourism dollars that are being spent? Art always seems to be a great idea, but then we talk about maintaining and the cost of, just keeping up with it. And the thing that I'm wondering about is, are we really spending our dollars that's going to best grow our economy? Because the last few years, we've been struggling with 1% growth. And if we really want to grow our community, is this where we want to do it? And if so, if the public says that if so, then what matrices are in place to show that it's actually making a dent in our way of life?
I'll let you address it. I have a few thoughts, but go ahead.
Anyone?
Jen?
I think it does come down to quality of life, quality of place. Number one, okay. Here's a difference for me anyway, is going into an ambiguous box store versus a local store. Driving down Douglas or driving down kind of an ambiguous arterial road on the fringe, you get a different feel. It starts speaking to your community. People that visit actually can see what your values are and get a feel and a flavor for that. Is there a matrix that I can put together that says if we put this sculpture here, the return on the dollar, on that $1 is going to be $1.50? I can't do that. I don't know who can for sure, but I don't know. That's my point of view and my experience.
So that's why we look at other cities that are having more robust growth than us. We always try to look at cities that don't have mountains and don't have oceans, that they have to work with what we have to work with. We try to see what they're doing. And then there are very large cities like Chicago that actually have done studies, and they can put up public art in a neighborhood. Then they start tracking crime statistics. They start tracking new business licenses, and they're able to see that those do correlate. However, in Wichita, for us to be able to have that kind of granular tracking would be almost impossible because of our size.
I heard a story about Cargill. They weren't just looking at Wichita when they rebuilt. They were looking around, and one of the reasons that they did choose to stay had a lot to do with quality of place and what has been done previously.
And I love your line of thinking, and I love evaluation and return on investment. And I agree, it would be really hard to track, but we can look at crime and we can look at some other things. But I was at a meeting today at Textron with another council member and some city council, but some county commissioners and some key staff from the city and county. and I asked the question of leadership at Textron, what do you need from us? What can we do for you at the city? And the number one thing they said is baseball, we love new performing arts, we love the quality of life. Because we can attract people to come here, but we need them to stay here. And that's what they can't do there, right? They give people a great job, a great wage, train them and make them happy at work, but the city can provide the quality of life. And so I think that's part of it. And I thought it was really profound. They didn't ask for tax abatements or anything else. They said quality of life is what they need the most from us. Anything else? Corey, am I correct? We don't have to vote on this, right? It's just, right? Just, yeah. Yes? Did somebody else have another thought?
Well, I was just gonna say, a couple of Purdue economists a number of years ago that studies stadiums, and one of them paid for itself in cash dollars. But that wasn't the point. I mean, again, it's all about.
So thank you all for the rich discussion, and I really, really want to thank Arlen and Jeff and Ty. I think they deserve a round of applause because they're doing this as volunteers. And I had a couple meet with me today, a group meet with me, and they want an initiative in the community, and they really haven't done a lot of background or a lot of community engagement. And I look at what you all have done as volunteers who just deeply care about the city as much as we do, and my thoughts and appreciation really just go with you for everything you've done. So thank you for your time tonight, but everything you've done to get to this point. So, Corey, do you have what you need from us? Fantastic. Thank you. Y'all have a great evening. All right, so next item is Pawnee Road and 127th Street East intersection improvement. And we have the folks from Garner who are here as well. So Gary, you ready?
Yes, I'm going to start things off real quick. I'm Gary Jansen, city engineer, and I'll be brief. I just wanted to kind of kick this off for you, then I'll let James Wagner, our project engineer, talk about it. Mike Spade and Kinley are here from Garver Engineering doing the design work for us. So I think, as all of you are aware, Southeast High School opened in 2016, give or take, just southwest of the intersection of Pawnee and 127th. Needless to say, the traffic with the high school alone has put some stresses on that intersection and impacted the level of service. There's some development that's happened in the area that's added to that also. But as we see around a lot of school campuses within Wichita, you really get a lot of traffic in those AM and PM peak hours. What we'd like to look at is the idea of building a roundabout here in lieu of a traffic signal. Right now, a traffic signal is not warranted. The intersection's working okay. It's not breaking down. Since the city took over that section of road when the high school was built, there have been no recorded accidents at all at that intersection. It doesn't mean that there haven't been any. Sometimes they don't get reported, and so we don't have record of them working with the police department. I think this is a really good spot for a roundabout. We've got 3 of them in the city, in Delano, and 2 of them in Central Riverside Park we'll look at. Delano carries quite a bit of traffic. It works pretty well. There are communities that are finding that roundabouts are a lot more efficient, they're a lot safer. These are a lot of things we're going to talk about through this, so I don't want to get into a lot of details, but this really suits itself for this type of improvement. It's something we programmed funding for about 3 years out in the capital improvement program. As Ken mentioned, this project was recommended for special consideration by the Design Council and has specific funding within the budget already for aesthetic enhancements. Ideally, what we think we would do at the roundabout is to look at improvements in the inner circle and most likely get Southeast High School engaged on what that might look like. We were able to make some improvements on Oliver adjacent to Wichita State. As part of that project, we built some big pedestals, and every year the Fine Arts senior class is going to build projects that are going to be put on those pedestals, and they'll rotate throughout the year. So it's kind of a neat deal. Who knows if that's what happens here. Anyway, these guys are going to talk to you in detail. They're the experts about the engineering side of this, safety side of it, why we think this is a good place to do this. I really believe this is the right thing to do here for a lot of reasons, but I don't need to waste your time on any more details. I'll let James have
As Gary mentioned, my name is James Wagner. I'm the capital improvement engineer, and I'm going to be the project manager on this project. We have with us Garver Engineering here, Mike Spade. He's the traffic guru, and then Kinley is the general project manager for Garver. And so they're the ones that have been hired with us to do the concept here. here. So starting off, this is the presentation that we're going to do here is about Pawnee and 127th, and we're looking at doing a roundabout, as Gary said. To give you an idea of where we're at here, the intersection is marked in blue, and then you have Gerald's golf course there. It's got the little golf club, and then the new Southeast Highs right there where their logo is. And I got a couple of the major roads marked there with 35 and Kellogg, the 54 highway. So a little bit of background. This we started off in 2010 with USD 259 platting for the new Southeast High School. They did open in 2016, as Gary mentioned. That hasn't impacted the traffic that's at that intersection. Originally, that was a two-way stop on 127th, and since then it's gone to a four-way stop stopping in all directions. I believe there was some flashing beacons, red flashing beacons attached to the stop signs as well to help people recognize and see the stop signs out there. The increased traffic can be somewhat attributed to strictly the high school at this point, but we are seeing a little bit of a development out there in this area. And we expect to see more development. And so I got a little slide here in just a few minutes that's going to go over kind of what we're expecting to see for development in the area. A little bit more background here. We did hire Garver to complete a traffic study and develop a design concept here in 2018. And their study focused mainly on ways we could improve this intersection so that we could stop seeing some of the backed up traffic, in our peak times. Those are mainly when school starts and lets out. So we did look at a couple options. The two that we did look at the most were a standard signalized intersection and a roundabout design. Again, Southeast High School here is where you are generating a lot of our traffic, and that'll still continue. And I think they're about maxed out on the people that they can have attending that high school. So I don't expect to see more from there, but I think you're going to start to see a lot more homes develop in the area because of the high school. Let's see here. Here's our development map that we have for this area. What you see here is highlighted in yellow all the areas that are projected to develop sometime in the future. I don't know how near a future, but some of those are actually going right now. The one highlighted in green is Cherry Creek, I believe. Cedar Creek. And currently, that's an 80-acre lot with approximately 280 new residential homes being built. So you can kind of see the perspective there. That's a small section, and you can see all the yellow. So that's what we're looking at is quite a substantial amount of homes. We did do some traffic counts in the area. Currently, what we collected in 2019, which is a recent count, was 7,500 vehicles entering the intersection. That's a total vehicle count coming from all directions. The Wichita Area Metro Planning Organization, WAMPO, has a 2040 projection of 17,000 vehicles per day by 2040, and then Garver, during their study, assumed slightly higher than that, close to 20,000 vehicles per day within that same time frame. In the map that you saw previously, what we see is approximately the possibility of 4,000 residential homes being developed, all within 2 miles of this intersection, and possibly 100,000 square feet of commercial properties. So that's not set in stone, but the writing's kind of on the wall. That's what you're going to see out in this area over time. Here, move on to the next slide. Trying to keep up here. Some of what we see out here is this is in the AM peak hour where you see southbound traffic, and this is a little bit skewed because to the east of here the bridge was closed, so you have a lot of traffic coming around that road to the east and coming in from the north. But you see traffic backed up for quite a ways. They're trying to get into the school at the AM peak. And then here again, you actually see people leaving school from the AM peak, people dropping off kids and buses leaving after they've dumped kids. So you see people, this is looking southbound at the school, there are people coming to the north. And next slide. And this is the PM peak coming away from the school. So you see all these people letting out all at one time around the end of school day, and you start seeing traffic backing up there a good long distance. And so these are the types of issues that we're trying to solve with the design that we're putting together here. So when we looked at the analysis of what we're doing out here, we looked at the existing conditions, which is now a 4-way stop, and we're starting to see the longer queues at the peak hours. And we expect that to increase as we've started to develop more residential homes and the possibility of some storefronts and such. Our current projection for the Pawnee and 127th corridors are a 3-lane road with a single lane each direction, and then a 2-way center turn lane. And we expect that a roundabout will tie into those quite nicely from both on Pawnee and 127th. And as Gary noted earlier, from everything that we looked at, the intersection of Pawnee and 127th doesn't currently meet signal warrants. And it's not even within the near foreseeable future that it will. So that being said, even after the signal, the intersection might meet a signal warrant, it's really only going to effectively work for 1 to 2 hours a day during these peak times. The rest of the time, a signal is going to become less efficient for the use of that intersection. So that's what we're looking at. That's a lot of the reason why we're looking at doing a roundabout. So I don't know as much on traffic signal warrants as our guys here from Garver, so I'm going to let Mike kind of step in here and discuss why signal warrants are important and how they affect the safety of installing a signal can affect the safety of an intersection.
Thanks. So just to repeat, my name is Mike Spade. I'm with Garver, responsible for the traffic study. I have 15 years experience, and these kinds of studies are basically what I've done my entire career. So we have a great opportunity here. As James mentioned, signal warrants. So as engineers, civil engineers, we are bound by our reference documents that are put out by Federal Highway, one of which is called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So we mentioned signal warrants. That's where all this comes from, the MUTCD. And in there are 9 warrants for establishing if the signal is warranted or not. And they're based off mostly traffic volume, but also pedestrian volume and railroad crossings and those things. The traffic volume is what applies here. But what's special or unique about the language in this document is it says you should not install a signal unless you meet it. But even if you meet it, it doesn't mean you have to. In fact, it says look for interim or alternative solutions. So you might be thinking, well, why? We have a lot of signals, they seem to work well. Well, they work well when they are warranted. When they're not, they cause issues. And as you see here, we list several of these issues. One is they actually increase delay when they're not needed. You're sitting at a red light, wondering why it's not your turn. That happens when the signal stuff's not needed, or only needed for maybe 20 minutes out of the day. The other is it turns into a compliance or a confidence issue. If drivers are at a signal that they realize is necessary, they stop following it, they get frustrated, they gun it the second it turns green, or are trying to make that end of the yellow. They can encourage cut-through traffic, going through neighborhoods instead to avoid the signal. And then also one thing that happens when it's not needed is that signals cause intermittent stops. And what the research shows that sometimes that causes more rear-end collisions. So signals aren't bad, but when they're not warranted, they do have issues. So as we mentioned in this slide, mimics what we have on the board there. We are proposing a roundabout at this study intersection, and it has a lot to offer, and we'll walk through these individual components. But what we have laid out here is a is a traditional roundabout, single lane circulating through. And then we also added right turn lanes as a nod to both the high school itself, and as we anticipate some growth out there, so we want to make sure this has a long design life. So just to break down roundabouts, because I know there are a couple here in Wichita, but not a lot. These are some principles. The guiding principle of roundabouts is slower moving traffic. So if designed properly, cars will circulate through the roundabout at about 20 miles per hour. And there's a couple things that are designed to ensure that. One is called the splitter island, as you see on the left, which encourages cars to actually deflect rather than go straight through. We're introducing some curvature in there. And then of course you have your it's called inscribed circle diameter, that's your outer diameter, and then you have your central island, which has two components. The kind of orange beige color there is called the truck apron. That's that would be a raised element, but very close to the pavement, and it's designed for larger trucks to off track and actually use that to complete their maneuver. And in the center area, as Gary mentioned, that is often used for landscaping or some kind of aesthetic enhancement, which helps community benefit kind of idea. To the right shows the basic operation here, where it's a generally circular shape. Sometimes we'll get some odd-shaped ones, but certainly here, four-legged, we would have a circle. Yield signs at entry, so you're always yielding to traffic that's actually in the roundabout itself, and then a counterclockwise rotation. So one of the prime benefits of a roundabout, you ask yourself, well, why this roundabout? Well, one is the safety data for these across the board, Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, everywhere it shows up is that tremendous safety benefits, reduction in collisions. So overall, 40% reduction. But what's unique is that the injuries that it prevents are the really serious ones. Your injury collisions and your fatal collisions. 90% fewer fatal collisions when compared against the signal. Now, why would this be? It's kind of an unconventional thing. Why are crashes going down? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is the slower speeds. Quite bluntly, a crash at 20 miles an hour produces fewer injuries than one at 45 or higher. And then the second idea is this reduction of potential conflict areas. So with the roundabout, that's a basic roundabout shown on the left there, 8 conflict points, and they're of the diverging kind. So not the crossing conflicts we see on the right, the traditional intersection where you're hidden at a right angle, and those are normally the most serious that cause those fatalities and injuries. So slower speed, fewer conflict points contribute to the safety benefits. And then we see those same safety benefits with pedestrian flows. 8 conflict points for pedestrians versus 16 for crossing. And we also have, for pedestrians, we have slower speeds, which helps. Your crossing locations, you're going mid-block, so you're only crossing one or two lanes at a time, so you don't need as big of a gap. And then actually, the way a lot of roundabouts work, and this one would be designed the way, is where your crosswalk is set back about a car's length from where a car would be waiting to enter the roundabout. So that car, looks for a gap, and the car behind it can focus on a pedestrian that's crossing. So you see a lot of benefits for pedestrians as well. So this last slide here is interesting, and this is based off research by the National Cooperative Highway Research Program that looked at installations of roundabouts in communities where there weren't many, and then what the attitude was before and then after. And what it showed is very interesting. So approximately 75% of those polled before it was installed were either negative or very negative about it. And then a couple years later, when asked again, that attitude changed almost across the board to well over 70% positive, very positive, and almost nobody was negative still. So good safety benefits, and it'll also function very well throughout the entire day. James.
I'll take this back over here, discuss some non-traffic issues apparently. So we looked at some of the stuff that is important for taxpayers as well. One of the things we looked at is costs. In a typical signalized intersection, you're going to have a signal that you have to own and operate and maintain. So you don't have to replace the signals every 10 years or 20 years or whatever that's required to replace out bulbs. You have minimal labor to maintain a roundabout versus having to send somebody out in emergencies to turn them back on and stuff. If you have a power outage, you have no electricity cost for the signal since you're not running power for lights. And overall, the roundabout functions more efficiently than a signal when you have the type of traffic that we have in this area. And so also, we have looked at this roundabout to model what we have as far as large vehicles. We looked at specifically buses and semi-trucks, and with also large tractor trailers that might be offloading out there. Now, someone has brought up the fact that there might be some farm equipment, and we will need to look at that as well. We have not started looking at that yet, so that's something that we're going to have to look at as well before we get going. I do have a couple animations here that we can look at real quick, and we can run through all of these in more detail if you want to talk about them afterwards, or during questions. But I'm going to run through a couple of these real quick, and this kind of shows you what a bus is going to look like going through a roundabout. And then I also have a tractor trailer. So this is your bus as it enters. It's going to go around and it's going to stay within that circle and do a whole whip around all the way 360 degrees without any issues. And that's a full-size city transit bus, correct?
Yeah, and that is modeled after a full-size city transit bus. They wanted us to look at that because Southeast High School actually uses transit bus for transport.
And then I have another one here, which models a semi-tractor trailer. As you can see, this tractor trailer's tail end is going to encroach in on that inner circle there and go up on the apron, that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to not carry normal traffic, but when you have longer vehicles, tractor trailers, it's meant to accommodate them in their turning movements. I have an overhead view of that as well, where you can actually see what it looks like from overhead and how it actually encroaches in on that circle. So that essentially is how it works with our larger vehicles. We'll go back to our presentation here. I can figure out how to do this here. No, dang it. Didn't do that right, apparently, sorry. As stated before, this is up for special consideration for aesthetics. We haven't come up with any thing set in stone, but at this point, ideally, what we would possibly look at was something in the inner ring that, like I said, probably dealing with someone there at the high school, getting their input, figuring out something to do with them, possibly something like we did at Wichita State, or something more permanent from the school as well. This intersection will need to close for construction. To be able to maintain traffic to the high school, the best way to do this is going to be shutting it down after school closes and try to get it open before school starts and doing all of our work in one summer. And our estimated construction date is the summer of 2022. So with that, I'm going to summarize kind of some of the key points of what we're looking at here. And one of the things that this intersection does need improvement to handle the traffic that we're going to see here in the foreseeable future, but it does not warrant a signal at this time. Roundabouts do not require to meet warrants, and they can immediately help with the traffic you're seeing now and into the foreseeable future as well. Once a warrant's fulfilled, signalization will only benefit traffic flow for 1 to 2 hours a day, according to what we've seen. So the remainder of the day that you're going to go through that intersection and possibly be delayed where you wouldn't have a delay with a roundabout. Roundabout works efficiently 24 hours a day. There's no start and stop with it. It's the same all the way. Analysis of our proposed roundabout indicates that it will outperform the signal for the design life of this intersection. So we've looked at forecasting how long this is going to last, and to the best of our knowledge, it's going to last for as long as the intersection will. Roundabouts can can reduce accidents, and what we pointed out was especially the fatality and the injury accidents. We do this by minimizing the conflicting crossing movements where you can T-bone somebody, and then slower speeds. It's a traffic calming device. You have to slow down to get in and through it. That's great for inexperienced or younger drivers where they may not have the decision-making skills in a typical intersection. And with the high school being in close proximity, that's expected to hopefully help in the future. We have the reduced maintenance costs and material replacement costs. We don't have to deal with that. It works in power outages. Even if you have power down, you don't have to send somebody out there. It's still going to work just the same as it did 10 minutes prior when there was power. And we're going to add the aesthetics in the center ring. Our financial considerations that we have at this point. Our existing budget for the project was $40,000, sorry, and that included the design concept and our traffic study. The adopted CIP includes $200,000 for design in 2018, and then $150,000 in 2021, and then $1.2 million in 2022 for construction funding. So before I conclude here, I wanted to show you some of the other ones we have across town. These are a little bit older designs, so they don't have quite the same geometry. The geometry that we would look at with a new one is going to be where you have a standard circle, and then you kind of take and twist the legs a little bit to slow people down. These don't quite have the twists of that they do, but these are essentially very similar to what we have, and you can look at these. These are the first two here at Riverside Park, and this is at Murdoch. As you enter the Riverside Park from the east, and then here's Central Riverside Park at NIMS, where you enter the park from the south. And you can actually see the inner circle there is being used by that small little trailer where he's hugging it pretty tight, and his little trailer is actually jumped up on the curb just slightly. And then the other one is also Delano, as mentioned here. This functions pretty well. You can actually see a vehicle in it now. This one's got the art piece in the center, so I don't know that our art piece is going to be quite as big as the clock tower. That's a pretty significant piece of work that was done with that one, but it looks something similar, I suppose, that the work proposing is something similar to that. Conway, Arkansas has has a intersection that's been designed. This is almost identical to what our proposed design is at this point. It shows how vehicles enter and exit. It's got the right turn lane you can see there. You can see a car turning right there, and then these people are traveling through, and you can see it moves traffic through fairly well. Here's some of the striping that's associated with that in a street level view, where you have your crosswalks, and you can split the crossing at the island. You can stop if you have to, and then walk across the rest of the way. Then you have the directions on the pavement where the left lane is to go through and then off to the left, and then the right lane is specifically for turning right. With that, that's pretty much the end of what I've got here. Our recommendation is that we approve the design concept, and we'll move on to questions.
So we'll start off, see if we have any questions from the board, and then we'll see if anybody from the audience wants to make any comments. But any comments or questions from the board?
Yes, sir.
Was that last one a four-lane roundabout?
The
Conway?
No, it's a single through lane and right turns, just exactly like what we're proposing. So that's just, it matches in well with a 3-lane roadway. It's got one through lane coming from each direction, and then it's got dedicated rights.
So what do you do with 3 lanes when there's 1 lane going into what?
Sure. So you have one receiving lane, one lane, where traffic exits the roundabout. Your center lane would be absorbed with splitter island. And then your third lane would be the lane that enters the roundabout. But then we're also adding what would be considered a fourth lane in this scenario, a right turn lane, 100 feet or so in advance of the intersection. So it would be a 3-lane typical section that, this would be part of, but that middle space would be absorbed into the splitter island at the roundabout.
There would be, where the center lane, as it bits to the splitter island, there'll be a gore area with striping too. I guess stripes would go the other way to let everybody know that the turn lane is ending right.
We didn't show the one over on Greenwich, but they have that, and they have a right turn lane to go around. But before you get the right turn lane to go around, they say to go left turn. That always makes me crazy. You know what I'm talking about?
I haven't driven through that one. I probably should have.
That's actually private going back in there, but I agree. There's quite a bit of traffic going through there at that, at the new destination development.
It's kind of confusing, isn't
It is. We actually have had questions about that, Dave, and I'm glad you brought it up again, so I think it's something we need to take a look at.
Well, and I'll just say specifically, Gary has been very adamant that we designed this where it lacks that, keep it simple, keep it a single through lane, so it is an easier roundabout to use, rather than having dual lanes that might create
Are the
confusion.
alternatives the way it is now for a roundabout, and that lights aren't an option?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
That's the alternatives today, or
You said it didn't meet the standards for lights, so the options are for four-way stop, four lanes.
Yeah, until it meets warrants, our standard practice is not to install a signal. Gary can maybe touch on that a little bit more. But pretty much.
I think Mike talked about it. I would just tell you again, even, and Mike talked about this, even if we got to a point that warrants were met, that still doesn't mean that it's the right place to put in a traffic signal for a lot of the reasons we talked about. Predicting development, especially in this area, is challenging. And these roundabouts can work, they could work for as long as all of us are around here. Even if development really explodes out there, it'll still work. It's been proven in communities. We're used to looking at traffic signals. That's kind of what we do. But it's something that we don't want to be so focused on anymore. And so even if we met warrants for a traffic signal, our recommendation is still that this is something that's going to be there for a long, long time.
Well, they went through this process at 45th and Woodlawn, and I understand that's not going to be around now. Is that right? Or has that been said?
Well, it's City of Bel Air, but that is correct. It's my understanding, and this gentleman right here probably talk about that because that's his area, but it's my understanding that there was discussion and the decision was made not to put it around about.
Yeah, and in that area there, the Catholic Care Center, they have a sign that was encroaching pretty closely. There was some developments, there's a business right there that was gonna have some access issues, that pre-existing drives that they don't really have the ability to relocate. So it wasn't well suited to this. This area we're talking about is a much larger footprint. There's no conflicts right now. Everybody would build around it.
That monument would take $5,000 to move that probably.
It's something different. It's like anything else. People are a little bit scared about change. I think there's a great place for roundabouts. An area like this is really, really the perfect place, I think, to make this work. And if for some reason it doesn't, we can still go back to what we were doing, but I'm confident from what we've seen elsewhere, nobody will want to go back.
I think it's a great idea, the roundabout, great idea. But you mentioned 3 lanes. I'm seeing 2. Which third lane?
Sure. So you have, you have one lane coming this direction.
Oh, the other direction.
Yeah, and then one lane coming this direction. And then
apologies. Little misleading.
Yeah, total crust. And then your center lane would be absorbed into the middle island like this right here.
Okay.
So that's what the plan is out there for the both corridors. 127 and the Pawnee will have a lane going each direction, and then the center lane, and that's how it matches in well with the.
So if you're doing a turnaround, it's just one lane.
Yep.
That's hugging that circle.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
But just so it's clear, if you're in that center turn lane, you're not just going to run into that median. Further back, it will effectively stop at the last entrance driveway, and then it'll be striped off there. You'll be forced to get out of that center turn lane.
Right.
There'll be no use.
And
It'll have no use.
And there would be no driveway.
Correct.
And studies show there's no need for two cars at the same time, 2-car wide
So I'm gonna
turnout.
tell you that, Mike, if you don't mind, the design recommended by Garber sets itself up that this could become a 2-lane roundabout if the traffic demands got to that point. I will tell you, and this, I'm not even have direct experience with it. It's not that it can't work. And coming into Emporia on Highway 50, you're coming to Emporia, there's a big roundabout there that was originally set up as a 2-lane and nobody could figure it out. So they took it back to 1 lane. There's one in Manhattan, 3rd and Anderson, Bluemont, at the exact same way that they thought would work really well for 2-lane. It's a little bit of a challenge. And there's some conflicting movements, and for people to understand, it could work. It's worked in other communities, but this will accommodate traffic for a long time without needing.
Are those common in Europe?
Yes.
Yes.
I went through a 6-lane one in Costa Rica. It was a mess.
8-lane in Damascus, and it
Yeah.
works like a clock.
Yes, yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't understand what was going on.
But this would easily accommodate adding another lane, just taking some space out of the splitter islands. If you look up on this picture right here, and tell me if I'm wrong, that spot right up in front of that light pole, that kind of gray area, if you look right down that middle island.
So right here could be removed, and then that accommodates, that can expand to a second.
20 years or whatever from now, whatever
Yeah.
version is. Okay.
The design would set that outside circle to eventually accommodate the second lane. But as Gary mentioned, I mean, we projected out, we were even higher than the WAMPO numbers, and it still was operating. So this is good life.
And the intent here is to keep it where we want it to be simple to use. We don't want to add the confusion of having a multi-lane roundabout right out the gate. We want to make sure that people have a chance to get used to what it is.
I expect to be retired before we have to go that route.
The one thing I want to mention, just as an aside, whenever you're talking about different things, there's always a little bit of resistance, and if people resist change. If you remember, right, a few years ago, the city of Wichita started doing 3-lane arterials instead of the 4 or 5-lane arterials, and everybody was furious. Why not do a 4-lane? And everybody said, "Hey, this is gonna be fine." You've seen a number of 3-lane arterials go in, and I don't hear a bunch of people complaining after the fact. They thought it was going to be a terrible deal, but they actually work pretty well. And so a lot of times it's just resistance to change that you see when things will work well if you give them a chance.
If the traffic volumes are appropriate, the 3-lane road works better than a 4-lane without a center lane.
Okay. I know Joe.
Right.
Joe.
Well, yeah, by the way, the vast majority of drivers here are going to be under 50, so the change won't be quite as big. Back to the cost benefit thing you raised earlier. At the moment, the choice is stop signs or this. It probably would be helpful to have, how long does it take 10 cars to get through, a stop sign versus a roundabout? That would be
Sure.
some sort of benefit.
We have analyzed that. I don't have that precise number, but we have a report has tables of information that would show the delay, especially if we do nothing out in the future, what that looks like.
Are you going to have to use eminent domain? You've got quite a bit of property there on the corner.
So we haven't had any discussions with any property owners at this time, so
I have 2 more videos. If this will kind of go towards your answer. I have 2 videos here. These are for the peak periods for the 2040 projections. One will be with a roundabout, and one will be with a signal. And what you're going to see in these, I'm going to play the signalized one first. What you're going to see in these is that you're going to see approximately the traffic moving at about the same amount, and this is peak period.
This is
the remainder of the day is going to work better in a roundabout. This is your signalized intersection. You can start seeing where you're seeing the backup of traffic.
And you can see on that.
And they're choking off the right turn lane.
That westbound lane is backing up, like you said, it's choking up the turn lane. and it queued up pretty significantly on that west leg with the signal.
Your blue cars are turning left and your yellow cars are turning right. So that's really that one. And then, so it's not a very long one. The files are so large, you can't put like a 20-minute slide here. So this is going to be a roundabout.
So I suppose it just takes a little time for those kids to get used to those. I was in Ireland and people going everywhere. If you're not familiar with it, you're going to.
When I was in New Zealand, I saw, I think, 3 signalized intersections. Everything else in the whole country was roundabouts.
And those 2 simulations, obviously, everyone's a little different when you run them because they're actually randomized because they want to make sure that it's random. But the roundabout backed up 13 cars at the intersection. The signal actually backed up more like 24 cars. At the peak of the queue, there was almost twice as many cars backed up with the signal, just because you have to wait for your turn.
Did that help at all kind of answer what you were asking?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think for your presentation.
I know Pete has a comment or two.
Sure do. I live at 127th and Pawnee, Sierra Hills, and we're not in favor of this at all. Questions? First of all, there's going to be no pedestrians walking there, so that part of your roundabout will be out because there's no sidewalks, no students walk there. One of the questions I have for you guys, because we dealt with this issue before, and working with Pete and Jim, Mr. Howe, we had 3 or 4 meetings, and after Southeast was already built and going, there was only 2 stop signs, and they were both on the north-south. So there was probably 6 or 8 of us, presidents of different HOAs, got together, and we had open forum like this and had some good discussion, good dialogue. And so we convinced those guys to put up the 2 additional stop signs there. That really, really helped. And another thing that we had in our area out there was the cotton picking speed limit, 55 miles an hour. And there was, so at Pawnee, at this intersection, you want to do the roundabout, there was no stop signs there. And I'm telling you guys, it was a cotton picking racetrack going down Pawnee. So we finally, we got that slowed down. And the thing that really concerns me more than anything else about the roundabout is the enrollment at Southeast now is 2,000. They have the capability to go to 2,200 or more.
Okay.
So what you've got now, just 1/4 of the students driving every day, that's 500 cars, 500 students. And I can assure you, living there and coming out of that subdivision, I know what backup is, either direction. Yeah, I mean, down 127th, north or south, and it's the same way, especially on Pawnee going west. But the issue is that I have 16 to 18-year-old kids, and we've all had kids, we all have kids, and I can tell you for a fact, raising 2 boys, my boys had stupid written right across their forehead at 16 to 18 years of age. And Dad, across his chest, had dumb A. And so, I'm sure it's no different now than when I was raising kids, teenage drivers. And that scares me about the roundabout is because after I see them take off, and believe me guys, I've been there hundreds of times at that intersection. And I watch these kids and when they, after the stop sign, they take off, and it doesn't matter if it's down Pawnee or 127th, it's hammer down. And even though the speed limit's posted on 127th at 40 miles an hour, and Pawnee is 45, you guys will slow them down a little bit, on the roundabout, but that's going to give them a running start because they're going to come around here and then wow, and it's going to be a slingshot coming out of it. But if we're going to do this, and you're saying it's good, for the school and this community, then over at 143rd and Harry, is another roundabout possibility. We've got a temporary signal light there that's just hung up. And your traffic counts, I think, are skewed. You did those in, what, 17?
Correct, so that's.
Okay, and you need to do them in 19 after school starts next week.
Understand.
And you need to take into consideration when you did that in March, the east lane on Pawnee was closed.
That's correct. So just
because the bridges were out. Now, and you've also got Greenwich and Pawnee closed. So your
But
traffic
those-
count is
those
going to be
weren't-
skewed.
Greenwich and Pawnee weren't closed when we did the traffic cuts. So,
In March,
yeah, it wasn't closed like it is now.
which one?
When what you're talking about, Pawnee and Greenwich right now, that wasn't closed when we did these most recent traffic.
Well, the going east though, with the two bridges, the county
I
replaced
realized
those.
that was closed, and we already acknowledged that during the
And,
presentation.
but how long is the intersection at Greenwich and,
We can, I'm happy to go out and get traffic counts.
yeah, I'd like to see
I can
that.
tell you right now, the traffic counts could double, and we would still recommend a roundabout. I'm not trying to sound like a smart aleck, but our recommendation wouldn't change. And I will tell you, I'm absolutely certain, one of the reasons why, it doesn't sound like you believe it, that roundabout serves as a traffic calming device. You talked about kids getting on stop sign and romping on it.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
won't. They will not around that.
Well, I'm just
roundabout.
concerned that they're not going to be able to figure out, because there's at least half a dozen or so yield signs here. And I don't know that they're going to be able to figure out all these yield signs. I think they're going to go, okay, it's my turn, I'm going. Because, does driver's education teach about roundabouts?
I think education is going to be key. And
I do too,
And I think,
yes.
and I don't know that it's, it may be something that we work through the high school with.
Speaking of the high school, has anybody contacted US
Yeah, I
259 about the roundabout?
I sent them a letter just like everybody else.
Has the city talked to them?
I have previously, yes.
Good.
People I've talked to.
Because I'm telling you, they were very upset about the traffic situation before we got the other two stop signs installed. They were very upset because they hadn't been included in conversation. But now let me tell you here, another thing too is with the roundabout, you're going to slow down the traffic. But keep in mind, gang, I just told you there's 500 students that's going to be driving. There's also going to be 200 vehicles with administrators, staff, support staff, and then there's 65 buses a day that goes to Southeast, twice a day.
None of that's a surprise.
No,
We know
but
that. None of
but
that's a
then
surprise.
that doesn't. We haven't even got into consideration of the other vehicles of folks that live there, and we travel that every day.
That's why we've modeled it, even though there were some things maybe with Pawnee being closed.
And another thing, the farm
I would tell
equipment
you
too is
again,
another
I would
deal.
tell you again, in this area like this, I don't want to sound disrespectful, the numbers you've talked about are so minimal. 565, those are nothing to be accommodated through a roundabout at all. Those numbers could double, and we would have zero concern about it being able to handle
I'm
that.
not so sure they won't be double.
Well, it
It is-
could be, and it'll still work just
Yeah.
fine.
And Gary, I just want to make one quick comment. I did reach out, it's a while back now, but I'm just stating this as a fact. I reached out to Mike Tian, the director of transit, because I was curious about this. And he came from a community that had a similar thing. He's not worried about the buses at all.
No, I'm just concerned. The biggest concern is the young driver.
Well, I want to make a
The
comment about,
roundabout probably good, but if you, like I said, if you're going to do one there at 127, and it's so well and good, you need to flop over 143rd and Harry.
You know what, I appreciate, hang on, Ken, just a second. I appreciate hearing you say that, if you don't mind, real quick. We talked about that. Right now, there's more traffic at that intersection there is at Pawnee 127 overall.
Yes.
And that's why it
I
lends
agree.
itself a little bit better to that. That doesn't mean that's out of the question, because the signal we put up isn't necessarily temporary. It's just a cheaper way to put a signal up.
Well, and that's another point, Gary, you brought up. We're talking about 1.2 million that we're going to do a roundabout, and we can do a signal for $150,000. We can replace a lot of signal lights over the course of the year for That versus 1.2 million.
Well, so, but then you've got operational costs.
That's,
Uh,
I can
we've
still
got
go a long ways with
resources
that.
What's that?
We can still go a long ways after our initial
Well, it doesn't
installation.
even warrant a signal right now, so we're either gonna build a roundabout or do not.
143rd, it doesn't warrant a
It
signal.
absolutely does. We would not have put the signal in if it
The
did.
temporary one up,
It warrants signals. We didn't put that up because it didn't. It
the one at,
warrants signals.
how about Harry and 127?
Yeah, it will absolutely warrants
It does
signals.
now?
Let me address.
Yes, please jump in, and then we'll take.
I want to address your earlier comment about the aggressive drivers,
Yep.
and you are correct. Kids can be very aggressive.
Mhm.
And you know the slide that we
Yeah,
had
right.
that had the, talked about all the conflict points?
Mhm.
That intersection could potentially get more dangerous with the signal than with stop signs, because you're gonna have that kid going and going, I can make it, and he's
Green
gonna
light,
push it,
yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
gonna go for it, even if it's red.
The biggest thing you have is turning left. Kids don't know when to make a left turn for the life of them. And that's when you expose yourself to
I'm
serious
concerned whether they're gonna
accidents.
be able to figure out yield signs and around it.
And there's danger, but I just wanted to point
Yeah,
out, that's
that's
the one
true.
thing about the aggressive drivers
That's
is
true.
those T-bones and other accidents are more likely to happen when you have that young aggressive driver who's trying to make it.
That's right.
And I think there was a comment earlier about how kids kind of, it was kind of an offhand comment, but kids kind of pick up stuff a little bit. Those guys are young, but they will learn pretty quick how to operate this. It's not, it's meant for people that have less experience.
So I know Nazir has a quick comment, then Sam, and then we'll go for community comments.
Well, one thing I noticed about your little diagram up there, and it really brought it to mind, is the safety issue. I think around, because run a red light, you T-bone somebody, that is a serious,
You
where
completely,
this is gonna cut down.
you completely
'Cause I
eliminate
was
that.
kind of like you, I kind of thought, oh, you're training people, but the seriousness of any accidents in there will be in.
And this brings up, this brings up the fact that you're talking about a lot of kids using that. You're talking about serious accidents. Who wants their kids to have serious accidents?
That's right.
So Nazir?
Yes, roundabouts really work, but we need to be educated how to use them.
Yes.
A
Yeah.
1-minute video with drones and actual cameras of actual cars going around in town over here, just 1 minute. It'll show us and these kids how to negotiate around. So the city can do this, and then it'll be helpful for most of us who don't know how, and make it mandatory for the school kids to
I think
do
that's
that.
completely within reason for us to possibly do something like that here, and especially promoting that through the school.
Thank you very much. You got yours already?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go to the community, and if you would like to make a comment, please just state your name and your address so that Corey can get it for the minutes. So just state it clear and loud so he can hear it, and then we have our awesome timer, Nick, and anybody who wants to make comments in our 2 minutes. So, yes, sir.
Justin Spiro, representing 127 Pawn, southeast corner of 127 Pawnee. I do have couple questions for the designers. If you can pull up slide 6 in the presentation, so I can direct your tab. We had you kind of had conversations about the overall design. Is the design consider the access control of the surrounding flats and the impact that it's going to do to the out parcels at our development?
We looked at that today. There's in the plat, it has a 400-foot setback from the intersection, and our design doesn't even go back that far.
Okay, so where your bottleneck stops, it's not even to the 400 feet yet?
It's short of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Excuse me, I guess it's not design 6. Ken, will you go ahead and take it to the one that showed your overall design? I'm
Yeah.
more concerned with the southbound leg. Okay, so right there, we're looking at the southwest corner, bottom left corner, that out parcel that's there. We've had a lot of mixed-use retailers interested in this site. You can see from the other presentation, people looking at development. That hard corner is going to be something that's going to be a prime piece of real estate people are interested in. Are we projecting race medians there? Or are you still saying that, I'm not that familiar with this plat, but you're still saying that's 400 feet from any intersection?
The plat there was a statement on the plat saying that the plat access control would be based on the city's established access management guidelines, which calls out for the 400 feet. what we would envision there is at that property line, you would want to do some kind of a joint use drive with the adjacent property owner to access around either that median would be what I would anticipate.
Okay. Does this design allow for full movement access going on Pawnee and also 127?
Bear in mind, this is a schematic design. If
I'm
you had,
just
a
asking for
specific,
compensation.
if you had a
Yeah,
specific
sure.
concern, you'd want to bring that up with.
Yeah, we'll be getting into that further as we get on.
Okay.
This is just conceptual.
If you looked at the one in Conway, you'll notice that the islands aren't anywhere near this long because they had existing conflicts that limited their ability to do the islands. So there's always flexibility to work with that kind of thing.
And current conceptual design isn't expecting any additional right-of-way takings?
Well, not on this, not on
Not
this
on the,
half.
not on the west half.
The northeast and southeast corner will require some land acquisition.
Wrap it up if you can.
Thank you.
Great questions. Yes, anybody else want to make a comment? Yes, ma'am. Can you state your name and your address?
Kim Tolley, 2121 South, 127th Street East. I know this will just end up being shoved through, but if it ain't broke, why fix it? The four-way stops are working. They really are working. What is the accident ratio from when that school opened to today? How many accidents have been at 127 and
There wasn't any,
Pawnee?
was there, Gary?
We have no reported accidents,
So
so we
why-
were able to look
okay,
up.
no reported accidents, and school's been there for 3 years?
3 years.
So we're gonna fix what's not broke. That's what I just don't understand.
I will say that there are complaints about the queuing, the backups and the congestion in that peak hour, and that's what this would be addressing, would be those issues.
Okay,
Crashes are not the only factor considered when making improvements in the intersection. In fact, more times than not, they end up being the last part of it. Not that public safety is not important, but that's very rarely the reason why.
And then also adding the more residential and development, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
and
another reason.
projected, I mean, this is still out in 2022, and we're projecting more development and more traffic by then. We're not wanting to wait until there's a bigger problem.
well, it'd be nice if you waited till 2040 because I'd be dead by then. I mean, I was out there before any of this whole fiasco started. And I acquired a barracks, 500 houses. The golf course was already there. And my high school that I went to and graduated from, which was fine in Export Lake.
Next time.
Is there, do you want to make any other comments, like, or any other wrap-up comments, or that summarize it?
I'm glad I'm in the county and I don't belong to the city.
Thank you for your comments, we appreciate it. Anybody else? Yes, sir. And your name and your address?
Levi, I'm with Cobb Valley Engineering. I'm not really supporting either way. Gary or Kate, I'm not sure which one of you supports, but I know you guys keep saying that even if traffic can hold the roundabout. If I was in there, something I want to know is, at what point would you recommend signals instead of the roundabout? What level of traffic? You guys might have that number already.
Right.
It would just be something good to know, because if it's 100,000, you're projecting
Sure.
20,000 and 2040.
Sure, we looked at this, and I want to just be clear, like, if a signal would work better here, we would recommend that. And I had numerous other projects, like a roundabout works well for volume patterns we have, relatively balanced, considering the school and everything there. So we went out to 2040, as numbers say, so today there's 7,500 cars a day entering the intersection roughly. The WAMCO projection, I think in 2040, 17,000. We went up to 19,700. At that point, the roundabout's still better. One of the things with roundabouts that can happen sometimes is if it does get very, very congested, where the signal's not operating great. In that case, the roundabout sometimes can be worse because you can't control certain movements. With the signal, you can give the left if there's a really heavy left turn movement. You can do that all the time. Roundabouts don't have that option. So what we found was even at that 19,700 cars per day, almost tripling what's out there, roundabout was still good. If you went 20% beyond that, signal would outperform, but signal would still be
operating poorly, it just wouldn't be as poorly as Roundabout. The virtue of our design is that if they ever came, which is going to be real far down the road, we've configured it to be easily amenable to that two-lane configuration if that was ever needed, which is again, talking 30 years from now.
Yeah, and I'll throw in an aside, he alluded to it right there. There are situations where roundabouts are just bad ideas. If you have heavily imbalanced traffic, you would want a roundabout, a large difference from one to the other. I was in Las Vegas, my dad was in the hospital many years ago, and they have a roundabout next to the hospital. And it was not a good decision to put a roundabout there. And certainly if we were in that kind of a situation where we projected an imbalance, we wouldn't do that. We don't have that kind of a situation here. If you double traffic, you're still, as long as you stay balanced, it's still going to operate well.
So a roundabout on Kellogg would not be a good idea.
Oh, that would be a terrible idea.
All right, so do you have another question or comment, Serge?
Yeah, so just want to say I appreciate that Gary's already reached out to the high school and James and taking this into account. So I think that you guys are doing a good job there. Working with the high school and actually training the kids different drives other stuff will help here a lot. I know that I'm only 2 years out of college. It's culture shock when I went to Manhattan, Kansas, and I did go to that roundabout on Anderson. And until you get used to it, I will say the kids are going to treat that like a stop sign. So it's going to be important that you do train them that it's not a stop sign, it is yield, that you do cut through movement. And at that point, I agree that I think that roundabouts are a very good thing once you get used to it. So.
Thank you for your, that's a great. Okay, so let's bring it back up to the board, because I don't think we have any more comments. So the recommended action is for us to recommend the proposed design concept. So again,
Sorry about that.
Advisory board, that's okay. So we want to hear your input. So if at any point somebody's ready, I would entertain a motion for the staff recommendation or whatever you feel.
Motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, so any other discussion before we call the vote? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the staff's recommended action, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
So passes. Corey, got it? All right, thank you for the robust discussion. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Gary, for answering all of our questions. We appreciate it. All right, so we have 2 more items left. So Dave, you're gonna help us here, take us to, let's see, 00024.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Ear with planning staff. CUP 1924 is a request to amend the CUP document for the very sexy CUP called Parcel 18 and 18A, which is essentially the southwest corner of 29th and Rock. And the property at 2949 is the was a restaurant. I think they called it 2 Olives.
Okay.
And it's vacant. It had a large vacant area. It has changed ownerships now. It's under single ownership, and the people there wish to establish it with a kind of the city code calls the entertainment center, which one, they want to be able to have an alcohol license to operate, as well as to lease that larger space to accommodate not only the internal improvements of restaurant and bar and all that kind of fun stuff, but also have room to use the vacant facility. Under the CUP and under the city rules, they have to formally amend the CUP. So that's what this is about. Planning Commission has heard that case and unanimously has recommended that it move forward. Just lovely timing as we come to you. This will not go to the council. We're in the protest period right now. So unless there's a protest, it would not go to city council. But we have the opportunity to share with you guys. So there's no physical changes intended probably other than the sign name change, but there's not expanding on the building. Parking is already fully there. Had 0 calls on this case. So be happy to answer your questions.
Any questions from the board?
So you've got no call, no.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Just a short comment.
Yeah.
This is the Tobia sisters, Rhonda and Jumana, used to be the olive tree 30 years ago. They're not going to come up with something sleazy or anything. I mean, they're really nice place to go.
Put that in the minutes, Corey.
I mean, they're
The language
people
going
and
in, make sure it's not sleazy.
they're good people and the establishment they have is pretty good, so I don't have anything.
Thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. Anybody from the audience here want to make any comments on this one? Okay. Any other comments before we proceed? I would entertain a motion. So Sam and Janetta the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, passes unanimously, Corey. You got it? So the next item.
Second case is the request to amend the CUP for the Meadowland Commercial CUP, which is really a rather large, awkward parcel the way that it's built, because I think it started before we got 96 and the Turnpike and Kellogg and everything else going on there. The property in question is on the east side of 127th Street, right up against the Turnpike. And if you bend past the little barricade to get down to that property, it's further to south on that east side, and it's just vacant ground with lots of trees on it. Primary request was to accommodate the idea that it would be expanded for uses to include self-storage. That particular parcel is such, there is a drainage easement, drainage reserve on the north side of the property. So to get all these other utilities further down, to do something even more intensive that would demand a lot of other utilities, it's not impossible. It's just money.
It's the drainage one.
Yeah. But yeah, this particular property's got 96 highway on the east side, the Turnpike on the south side. 127th Street, that location, I don't think it really has got any plans for improvements beyond what is there now. So the idea of the self-storage added as a viable option for that development to property to develop makes some sense. It's vacant on the west side of 127th Street. It's in this little county. Anyway. They also asked for.
Kind of close to those apartments?
Pardon?
It would be fairly close to those apartments that are just being built.
They're building, yeah, well, there would be the drainage way separating the apartments from this parcel.
That'd be a good deal.
That's a
I'm
big.
sure they need some storage.
And, but the, so the modification is on the uses allowed on the parcel. And also addressing the addition of, if you've ever paid attention on, as you're going south on the Turnpike, once you get underneath the bridge, you'll see an old billboard that's been there for a long time that currently advertises Baker Furniture. They want to upgrade that to meet a modern billboard size, and are requesting the ability to put a second billboard in there. A couple of unique things that come into play is one, that there's a restriction on no billboards within 600 feet of 96 highway. Well, there still is room for the another billboard closer to 127th Street. They have the right under the city code, sign code, to upgrade the existing billboards. So we've added a modification to allow the current billboard to be upgraded to the current standards, and then also another one to be put closer to 127th Street. So that was done. The language had restricted it to just the self-storage complex, but at the request of the applicant, they wanted to retain some other uses potentially, because the primary use envisioned in the CUP was more apartments. And so they didn't want to completely lose that. They had to rezone to GC in order to get the billboards. But we restricted it back to, I think, it was GO uses with the additional GC for the billboards. So Planning Commission did approve that. We're also protest. No, we cleared protest. So there wasn't no process, but this will go to City Council 27.
Yeah. Did you get any calls or ladies' questions?
The only call I had on that was someone involved, I think, with the residential stuff on the other side of 96. And their only concern was to ensure that we were not going to allow a billboard on 96. And we said, no, that's not one of the options at all. They said they had no problem with anything else about the issues.
The only vehicular access is 127?
Yes.
That's the question I have. I assume you're going to move the road close sign down to the second bridge. Otherwise, there's no access to this.
If they don't, then they'll learn KDOT will run that. So, yeah, but no, right now there's a barricade across at Douglas. It says it's road closed. But
I drove around the road is on down. It's not in great shape. Now, this is not high traffic where you're going to rush hour down to the storage. But I'm still concerned. You were back 2 months ago when we had the duplex thing. We're still putting an awful lot of, putting additional traffic on not very good roads.
It's not probably would be triggered by this case. The property that was across the street to the west was not when I was here. I don't know, Gary, you guys recall if you want to talk about what theoretically was even offered of tying 127th over to Delta, and as part of the Kellogg improvement, actually was going to change the traffic accessibility in that area, primarily for 127th, but that landowner was not going to do anything. Now, if and when they come forward with a proposed plat, who knows what's going to change? So.
Well, I'm right on it that the area is being cleared.
Yeah, that's a planning issue more than
the area is being cleared on the west side of 127. It should come off the turnpike. Yeah. It's commercial, isn't it? That's why it doesn't look like residential.
The big property, I don't think it's probably commercial right now. I think it's just
no, the west side of 127th, right north of the turnpike, is actually in the county and zone residential, as I recall.
This is right on 127, just on the north side of Douglas.
North of Douglas.
To the north.
Yeah, there's stuff that's happening up there. That there's been some zoning changes and other things going north, but nothing south of Douglas.
So again, my concern is the amount of traffic. The question I ask is why aren't we connecting 127 to California?
So, first answer is 127th Street from the north has never been connected to Kellogg.
Well, I would you guys do it just as bridge out.
It was
so I
from-
assumed
It was from the south.
Private bridge to the department.
That access has always been KDOT's maintenance yard. That's the only place it went to. For the same reason, we're not connecting 127th Street from the south. We're getting rid of all aggregated intersections with Kellogg. That's where our highest accident rates are. There's no room to build an interchange there. There's not traffic volume to justify it. That's where T96 and the KCA come through. You can't squeeze all that in.
Well, doesn't that? I thought that was the one that went by Party City and goes right straight into Lowe's, doesn't it? Is that not 127?
On the south side of the Lowe's.
No, that's Delta.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Zelta goes through there, correct? Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
At such time as that landowner seeks to rezone or gives it to a developer and comes forward with a rezone and an inward plat, who knows what's going to happen at that time. But right now, no, nothing's happening.
This is a dead end street basically at Kellogg. 127th
Well,
dead ends at
dead
Kellogg.
end in that it doesn't go on through
Right.
and it doesn't really lead you into, you don't end up there with no turnaround.
Right.
You end up in Kadosh.
Right, right. So if this piece is going to develop, this would be probably the best use for it versus another apartment complex that will generate a lot more
Well,
traffic.
historically, and it also, at least our belief was that for that portion of 127th Street, if this was developed primarily for self-storage, the only reason you're gonna go down there is to get into self-storage. At least until something happens west of 127th, and then it's all different.
Right. That's good project.
Any other questions, comments? And entertain a motion at any time?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Thank you very much, Sam. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I would choose myself.
Recuse yourself. Thank you, I understand. Awesome, so I think the only thing, thank you very much, Dave. Great job.
The only thing I was gonna ever add, and I almost chimed in on roundabout stuff. My last job was up in Junction City, but we were part of the Manhattan NPO. And they had a great presentation about doing that. Who talked about the long-term benefits of roundabouts. And it was a very eye-opening to a lot of our elected officials who have suffered through roundabouts with a lot of public opposition and realize now that they're worth great. And at that time, driving particularly 77 and knowing the roundabout at 77 and 50, which before had a lot of accidents. And they just don't have it.
Thank you.
So we may talk about Chaser, who that guy was.
Yeah.
That was a phenomenal thing for. And he also talked about their chief.
Thank you, Dave. So with that, we are adjourned Saturday, 8:30. If you can make it for the breakfast, that would be fantastic. Here.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Harris. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Be safe going home.